Let the vengeance begin!
Howdy howdy, SueDevil here, and welcome to an update video on melee attack and defense stats, charge bonuses, and weapon strength types. I made a video on this probably about 2 years ago, but I recently had a comment on one of my videos where I had seen another video that talked about magic damage and what it affects, and in that video it talked about it affecting weapon damage and not weapon strength, and the comment said exactly that. So I thought I would do some testing and update this sort of technical aspect of the video. So if you want to go through and understand melee attack and defense, armor mitigation, weapon strength, weapon damage, armor piercing damage types, and this type of thing, this is the video for you. It'll be a little bit longer. I do have a lot of testing in it, and I will go over the formulas and this type of thing. So I'll just head over to the spreadsheet and we will start going. So this basically, I want to look at melee attack and defense stats, charge bonuses, what do they actually affect? Our infantry bonuses, bonus versus large, etc., and weapon strength types, magical, fire damage, and normal damage. And we will just go through, and I'm going to start going through the terms and defining those. Then we'll get to some of the tests and some of the data and analysis as we get through. So weapon strength is made up of two components, and I would call this normal weapon strength, or just weapon strength. And that's made up of weapon damage and armor piercing damage. Now, weapon damage is mitigated by armor, and armor piercing damage is not. And it's important to understand those terms, because a lot of buffs will talk about weapon damage or armor piercing damage, and some will note weapon strength. So these often get misused, weapon strength and weapon damage, in just the simple use of the language, or your understanding even, and my understanding even, as to what they actually mean. So it's important to know the difference between weapon strength and weapon damage. So resists and bypasses act on weapon strength as a whole. So fire damage, magic damage, physical resists, magic resists, ward saves, they act on this weapon strength. So really this weapon strength, not necessarily weapon damage or armor piercing damage, unless there's a specific buff that says so. So the bonus versus large, charge bonuses, bonus versus infantry add to melee attack and weapon strength. So they add to this so I even made a mistake here. Weapon damage. So this is funny. It's so easy to make this mistake. It's funny. They act not on your weapon strength as a whole, but just on your weapon damage, which can be mitigated by armor. So they act on your melee attack and your weapon damage, which is important to note. So buffs and debuffs can act on one or the other, or both, or damage type. So there's a ton of buffs and debuffs in this game, which makes it so amazing to analyze because of the way they interact, but it can act on all of these things. So something that's important to understand is your armor mitigation formula. So basically, it looks at your weapon damage, so this first part, weapon damage, not your weapon strength, and it multiplies that by a factor, basically 1 minus 0.75 of your armor divided by 100. Now that's an average. If you were to attack something 100 times, it would end up coming to about 0.75 times your armor, but it is a random roll. It's important to note that basically 134 armor is where you get the maximum mitigation from your armor against weapon damage. And the roll can never be less than 1, but it is random. So there is a random roll. So if you have a lot of armor and you're fighting against something with a high weapon damage but not much armor piercing damage, there will be a lot of randomness in how much damage they do every single time. So there are three main sources of randomness in a fight, and this is important to understand. So the first source is actually hitting in game. So you know, your units get knocked around, maybe their cone moves, their weapon doesn't quite make it, but your unit actually has to hit another unit, I guess physically, you know, pixel on pixel in the game. Their cone of attack has to contact before all of the rolls take place. So that's why you can sometimes dodge charging dragons. You know, if you quickly dodge one way, they might not actually hit you, so that the hit has to occur in the game first. So that's a large source of randomness. Then there's the second large source of randomness is your armor mitigation, because there is a random roll in that. Now it averages out to 0.75 times at that armor, but there is a random roll that. And the third, I'll say, major source of randomness is stagger and knockdown animations. Now they can happen more or less, but basically if you get charged, you know, like one of your dwarf characters gets charged, sometimes they get punted like 40 meters. Now that is a random roll. It doesn't happen every single time they get charged, but it can happen. And same when they get hit by something really hard, they can be knocked down or fall down or these types of things. So that is also a source of randomness in any fight. Now your percent chance to hit starts at a base of 40%. It adds your melee attack minus your enemy's melee defense. So if your melee attack is 70, your enemy's melee defense is 30. That's 70 minus 30 is 40, plus 40 is an 80% chance to hit. Now this has a minimum and a maximum. So your minimum chance to hit no matter what, even if you have 0 melee attack and your enemy has 80 melee defense, you're still going to hit them 10% of the time. And your maximum is 90%. So there's always a chance to hit, and there's always a chance to miss, no matter what those stats are. So when we go through the basic formula of, we'll call it normal damage, or just damage, you have your base damage times your armor mitigation. So your base damage or your weapon damage, let's put that there as weapon damage. It's funny, you know, when you're going through this, but your weapon damage times the armor mitigation plus the armor piercing damage multiplied. Now that whole thing is multiplied by the damage type modifiers. So physical resistance, magical damage, magical resistance, and these types of things. These modifiers act on the entire formula, not just a part of it, not just weapon damage or armor piercing damage. They act on all of the formula, which is why they can be actually quite important in the way that damage is actually calculated. So these things may seem obvious, but they're not so obvious. Physical resistance reduces physical damage. So physical damage is normal damage. Basically, it acts on entire weapon strength, weapon damage plus armor piercing damage. Magic damage bypasses physical resistance. So if something has physical resistance, magic damage bypasses that. And obviously magic resistance reduces magical damage. So the way these interact is fairly straightforward, but understand they act on the entire damage set, right? They act on the weapon strength, because that is your damage type, and they act on everything, not just one or the other. There are buffs that do act on one or the other of weapon damage or armor piercing damage, but the damage types act on your entire weapon strength. And we're going to go through and do some tests which will make this really clear, and you can come back and take a look at this. Now, fire damage only affects units that have weakness to fire damage or have been made so through a debuff. So you'll have units that can have magic damage and fire damage, but your fire damage only affects units that have a weakness to fire damage. And often that's regenerating units, though all regenerating units don't have a weakness to fire damage. It will say in the tooltip that they specifically have a weakness to fire damage in that case. Ward saves. A ward save mitigates all damage. Now there are a couple units I think that have ward saves, or maybe they have a short-term ward save, but you see that a lot more in campaign than in multiplayer. And ward save mitigates all damage, period. Magic damage, fire damage, just normal damage. And that's why ward saves are so powerful in campaign. Now, there are many other modifiers in combat, and we're not going to go over all of them because it's quite complicated. And again, why this game is so wonderful and fun to analyze is there are other modifiers that modify your weapon strength. They modify melee attack, melee defense, your armor, all kinds of things, like vigor for one, how tired your units are, flank attacks, rear attacks, if you have a hill advantage, if you have the aquatic trait and you're in water, or you don't have the aquatic trait and you're in water, or you have strider, impact damage. Now I'm not entirely sure exactly how that works out, but basically if you have a very, very heavy unit that's moving very, very fast, apparently it does more damage. I've read that somewhere. I don't know that to be a fact, but it may be. Magic buffs and debuffs, unit buffs and debuffs. So you can have, there's magic that can buff up melee attack or weapon damage. There's units that can buff up other units with melee attack and melee defense. There's armor sundering units. There's a lot of modifiers in combat, and this is what makes the game so interesting to play, because a lot of the game is about getting the right unit on the right unit so that you can maximize your modifiers and damage types and stuff like that. So I'll go over to some of the testing that I'm going to do, and we'll go back and actually do the test. So I'll just go over here. So one of the best possible tests, I think, to really show charge bonus and your weapon damage and modifiers is basically Grombrindle. He does magic damage. So magic damage bypasses physical resistance. Okay, he does have a lot of armor piercing damage, and he has 185 weapon damage, and he has 45 charge bonus. So against a Banshee that has 75% physical resistance, Grombrindle will bypass all of that physical resistance, and the Banshee also has 0 armor. So if we look at the combat interaction, he has 500 weapon strength, and it's all magical, and he has 45 charge bonus. So his very first hit, he should do 545 damage, because you add 45 to your melee attack to see if you hit first of all, and then 45 to your weapon damage, which is part of your weapon strength. So that equals 545 damage. And you know, the Banshee actually does magical damage, and Grombrindle has magical resistance. So we'll go and take a look at that. So we're just going to go and run that battle real quick so we can see for ourselves what the actual numbers are, and then we'll go and look and analyze them. And it's hard sometimes to make both units hit, so I may end up, if we get the first go, we'll happy day, but if not, I'll try and remember to cut out the tests so we'll get them to hit. Okay, so perfect. So Grombrindle has been hit, so he's at 4183 health, and the Banshee is at 1840 health. So we go and we'll say Grombrindle's at 4183. So we're just going to go here, the actual 4183. I've run all these tests once already, and the Banshee is at 1840. Correct? Yeah, it's at 1840 health right here. And if we look at the Banshee's starting health, 2385 minus 1840, that is indeed 545 weapon damage. Now why? These are the calculations, the chance to hit 117% and 57%, and this is the calculated damage. Grombrindle to Banshee is calculated at 136, not 545 yet, and the Banshee to Grombrindle at 165. So we're just going to go, and the reason it is because I have all their stats here, and then I have the modifiers, and the calculation just takes into account these modifiers. So I know that because Grombrindle does magical attacks, this physical resistance does not actually get counted, so I'll put 0 there, and sure enough, Grombrindle's calculated damage in this is 545. His actual damage is 545, which is his 500 weapon strength plus his charge bonus is the damage that he does. And the Banshee did 173. The calculated is 165. So because the Banshee does magical damage and have magical resistance, so this, is very close. Now there are, the Banshee does 210 armor piercing and 70 weapon damage, and Grombrindle has 120 armor. But so there's some randomness there, and it never quite calculates right. The only way to get this really close to reduce the randomness is to test against units that have very little armor, which we will do. So we're going to do some more testing. But basically you can see that yes, indeed, the charge bonus actually adds to your weapon damage and to your melee attack. I'm actually doing another test where I can prove this, but it's very, very tedious, and I've got to do like 20 tests that last quite a long time to make sure I get a nice level set of data. But basically, that is the case. And it's the same way with your bonus versus large and your bonus versus infantry. It adds to your weapon strength, your weapon damage, not your weapon strength. So does not have an armor piercing element to it. So the next test I wanted to do was Grombrindal versus a Rune Lord, so we'll just get out of here, and this one can take a little while to actually do. Concede that defeat. Yep. And we'll end the battle. Because a Rune Lord you can bring onto the field with 55% magical resistance. And Grombrindal does magical attacks. So we'll actually see if that calculates out the way that we think it should. So we'll go and grab Dwarfs, and we'll grab a Rune Lord, put him on his Anvil of Doom, give him the Locust of Power, and get him out on the field. So the Rune Lord doesn't do magical damage, so Grombrindal's magic resistance won't affect the Rune Lord, because Rune Lord just does normal damage. So if we click on our Rune Lord, he has physical resistance of 25%, which Grombrindal will bypass, but he has magic resistance of 40%. Why does he not have 55? Okay, let's just start the battle, and we'll get that going. Okay, so Grombrindal got damage, and he got damage. So if you look, oh, there, it's active now. So there he is, 55% magical damage. So the Rune Lord is down to 40-10. So we'll go to the Rune Lord, actual Rune Lord damage, 40-10, or whoops, actual 40-10. Grombrindal is at, where is Grombrindal? At 42-15. So Grombrindal 42-15. Obviously I've already done these tests, but I want to show them so that you guys can all see for yourself. Grombrindal 42-15, Rune Lord 40-10. 42-15, 40-10. So we look here at the calculations. Now these don't take into account everything yet. So we know that Grombrindal bypasses that 25% physical resistance for the Rune Lord. So we'll put that to 0. And he has just the 55%. And the Rune Lord is not affected by the magic resistance because he has normal damage. So if we look at our calculation, the Grombrindal should do 152 damage to the Rune Lord, and he actually does 154 damage. And the Rune Lord should do 126 damage to Grombrindal, but he does 141. So these damage variations are actually randomness in that armor calculation. That's how we know there's a random roll in that part of the calculation, because the armor piercing always gets through, and if there is no armor, there is no randomness, just like we can see up here against the Banshee. So you can see that this randomness actually can be fairly large sometimes. So I wanted to go and do some testing against Wurzag, because it turns out Wurzag's actually a very good test subject for these types of things. So we'll concede defeat and end the battle, and we'll go and see Wurzag. Where are you, Wurzag? Right here. And we'll make sure all of his stuff is off, just so we don't get anything weird. Alright, and the reason Wurzag's actually a good test subject is because he has physical resistance of 25%, which Grombrindal will bypass, but he also has 30 armor. So we're going to see with physical resistance and armor what happens, plus Wurzag has a buff of percentage to weapon damage, charge bonus, and melee attack, so we can see if those calculations end up coming correct as our formula. We can see if the actual damage matches our formula based on adding this frenzy mechanic in there, just for interest's sake. So we'll go and start that battle. And we've been very lucky so far. They're all hitting each other the first time. doing a lot of this testing when you prepare for these types of videos. Like the AI does funny things, and so I won't have had to cut out anything just yet. So we'll get that going. Start battle. Wurzag is dancing, and we'll get them to attack, and they've both hit. Perfect. So Grombrindle is at 42.45. So we'll go to Wurzag. He's at 42. Did I say 42.45? He was at 42.25 last time, interestingly enough. And Wurzag is at 25.86. 25.86, the same. So we know the Frenzy mechanic adds 12% weapon damage, 8% charge bonus, and plus 8 melee attack. So you look in the formula, Wurzag actually has 43 melee attack plus that 8. He has 245 weapon damage plus that 12. And he has 55 charge bonus plus the 8%. So that's where these numbers come from. Now we know Wurzag's physical resistance is not going to matter. So that's got to go to 0. And Wurzag doesn't do magical damage. No, Wurzag does not do magical damage, so Grombrindle's magic resistance is not going to matter. So when we go and look, Wurzag should do about 128 damage to Grombrindle. He actually did 111 in this test, and Grombrindle should do 493 damage to Wurzag, and he actually did 510 in this test. Now, we know the maximum is 545. We saw it. So about 35 damage is being mitigated there by that 30 armor. And this, again, is where the randomness lies. It should be 493. If the average comes out, it's actually 510. It should be 128. For Wurzag to Grombrindle, it comes out to 111. So if we do this enough times, like 20 times the averages, we'd see how much actual damage Wurzag did to Grombrindle. After 20 tests, it would start coming out very, very close to 128 on the button. Same with Grombrindle going to Wurzag. And I might actually do all those tests. Well, I'm doing a bunch of tests, but I'm doing them for different reason. So anyways, I also wanted to go and look at Sigvald. Because Sigvald, and did I have Sigvald versus Wurzag, right? Yep, Sigvald versus Wurzag. Because Sigvald has a ton of weapon strength, but it's all weapon damage and very little armor piercing. But so we can get to see now Wurzag's physical resistance actually acting in the combat event. So we can see that for ourselves. So let's go to Warriors of Chaos, and we'll grab Sigvald. Where are you? There we go. So you can see Sigvald actually has 520 weapon strength, which is quite high. 340 is weapon damage, 180 is armor piercing. The reason Wurzag is good is because he doesn't have a massive amount of armor. He only has 30, so some will be mitigated, but the randomness will be less. But we'll get to see that physical resistance in operation in this event. So we'll go see Sigvald damage. Going. Okay, get you in there. Hopefully they both hit each other, and looks like Sigvald has been hit. Sigvald has been hit, and Wurzag has been hit. So Sigvald has 3720 hit points left. Okay, 3720. Where's Sigvald? 3720. We did 3736 last time, so 3720. And Wurzag has 2747. So we'll get 2747. Okay, and if we go and look in our calculation, says because we don't have any resistances here and we only have the physical resist here, our calculations should be right on the money or very, very close. And we calculate that Sigvald should do 359 damage to Wurzag, and he actually did 349 in this case, and Wurzag should do 178 damage to Sigvald, and he does 195. Again, that therein lies the randomness. So that is the battery of tests. I hope it clarified some of the ways these things work. I wanted to go and take a look at fire damage just for fun as well. So the nature of the rest of the video is going to be, just looking at the way fire damage operates, like how powerful it can be in the right situation. But hopefully that was, explained a lot to people that were wondering, because I definitely didn't fully understand magic damage before I went and did this. I mean, I understood melee attack and defense and how they interact and armor mitigation and a lot of these things, but I'm still learning about this game every day. Hopefully this was presented in a way that makes sense, so that it, anyone watching can learn a little bit about how the game works. So we're going to go and do a quick test with fire damage just to see how powerful it is, and to see how our units can interact. I think it's a fun test. We'll go and get the vampire counts, and a very powerful unit they have is the Sternsmen. Now these guys have regeneration, and if you look at their tooltip, they have a 25% weakness to fire damage. So I will go and get our beloved Dowie. I'm going to get the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass. I'm also going to get a unit of Longbeards. And I'm going to make their stats equal, because we're going to test these two so we can see what the difference is. So these guys have 30 melee attack, 50 melee defense. These have 30 and 48. So I'm just going to give them one chevron. Boom. 31 and 50. And they have 32 weapon strength. These guys have 28. But they have a bonus versus infantry. So it's still not quite right, but close enough. And I, of course, also want to get the Dragonback Slayers, because they have this Power of the Dragonback, which gives an additional 22% weakness to fire damage. So we're just going to go and look at a couple fights against those Sternsmen, because the Sternsmen are a pretty amazing unit. Like, they're really powerful, actually. I think they're probably the best unit the Vampire Counts have. Maybe the Claw of Nagash or the Mortis Engine might be considered better, but these guys are certainly not bad. So I'm just going to do a test without the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass. They're just going to sit in the sidelines. We'll get our Longbeards here. So we'll get this fight going. We'll get our Longbeards in, and then we'll get our Dragonback Slayers in. And this fight takes a long time to resolve. Okay, we'll just fast forward it, and basically we'll see how many. We're just going to judge how many kills that the Sternsmen get by the end of the battle. And you can see the Sternsmen actually have really good stats. So if I grab my Longbeards and look at the Sternsmen, like, they have better stats than the Longbeards by quite a bit. But they're expensive. They're 1,050. But the Sternsmen have 29 melee attack, 51 melee defense, 38 weapon strength, plus they have a bonus of 8 versus infantry. So their melee attack is actually 37, and their weapons, their armor piercing is 8, and their weapon damage is actually 38. So they're quite a powerful unit. You can see they're doing a number on our Longbeards and our Dragonback Slayers. Like, Longbeards and Dragonback Slayers are very, very good units, and the Sternsmen now are up to 62 kills, and they think they're winning. Well, they I guess they are winning, and because of that, regeneration is quite powerful, and the Dragonback Slayers are debuffing them. So you can see this Power of the Dragonback is going off, or making them flammable, constantly weak to fire damage, but nothing in here is doing fire damage. So what are these guys up to now? They're up to, Sternsmen up to 97 kills. We're at 54 minutes. Just curious. I haven't been watching. I've done this test a bunch of times just out of curiosity, but I haven't really watched the clock. We're at 53 minutes-ish. We'll see if we're going to get down to there. Oh, Sternsmen might actually beat both these guys. They're up to 121 kills. Ah, okay, good for them. So Stern got to 52, basically 53 minutes flat, and the Sternsmen got 122 kills. So 53 and 122. So we'll concede defeat, and we're just going to rematch. And we'll actually get something that is doing fire damage with the buff from the Dragonback Slayers to do fire damage. So Sternsmen, also always watch out for those guys. They're a very powerful unit. Obviously, you can see they took out the Dragonback Slayers and the Longbeards all by themselves. So for a unit that costs 1,050, that is no joke. Okay, so we'll start that. Get them going in and get them going in. Now we got the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, who do flaming attacks, and they have the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass do have a bonus versus infantry as well. There we go, of 6. So it's not as good as the the Stearnsman, but the Stearnsman got like 120 kills and it went down to 53 minutes. And we'll just see how powerful this is when you, and this is why if I can, I always try and put the Dragonback Slayers and the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, if I put them both in the army, I try and put them in that general vicinity. Not that it's, because it's not easy to get matchups like this, but you can sometimes do it by accident just by having them close by to each other. So these Stearnsmen are now at 44 kills, but they're going down pretty fast. Our Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, are definitely doing very good. 49. We're at 56. We went all the way to 53, so this looks like it's going to resolve about 3 minutes faster at 56. Yep. So 3 minutes faster, and which is pretty big, and they only got 52 kills versus 120. So fire damage is pretty darn powerful, and it's just a basic, because it acts on the entire formula. It's not just it's not just the weapon damage part, it's on the entire weapon strength, armor piercing and weapon. It multiplies against the entire formula, not some subset of that formula, because this melee attack, these symbols here act on your weapon strength, not a portion of your weapon strength, which is the important part. So yeah, that's the video. That's some of the testing. Obviously I am doing other testing as well. But I have such a backlog of testing. I always start testing stuff and then never finish it. For all the videos I've gotten out and all the testing I've done, I probably have 10 times as much sitting half done or partly done or stuff like that. You can ask Soulhammer. We've done tons of testing together, but I haven't released a video yet. We did that like 2 months ago. But I hope you've found that interesting. Hope maybe if you haven't learned anything, it's made it clearer in your mind what these modifiers like magic damage, flaming attacks, what they operate on, what bonus versus infantry, bonus versus large, and your charge bonus actually operates on. Like your charge bonus versus infantry, and bonus versus large do not operate on your entire weapon strength. They only operate on your weapon damage, which can be mitigated by armor. So that's important to know. And basically, I at some point I'll do a proper video looking at all the other modifiers like hill bonuses. I do have some testing I did on the miners where I showed the hill bonus and the aquatic bonus as a bit of extra testing in there. And I'd like to do a full set of tests on all those modifiers just for interest's sake, because I think they're pretty important to see how powerful are things like Wa or harmonic convergence, or these types of things, and some of our own. I have done some limited testing on the power of our own buffs with the Runesmith in terms of our armor, the extra armor, and the damage mitigation, etc., etc. But anyways, I hope you found that interesting. Love to hear comments. I mean, comments are comments are honestly my favorite part of doing this, because they're always interesting, and I bet half my videos have had something to do with a comment. And this video I made because of a comment, because when you hear something like that, I learn a lot through my comments, because a lot of the people that watch these long, tedious, spreadsheet filled chatty videos are the type of people just like me that like to think their way through things and to learn and to teach and to kind of get a better understanding as a group, because I'm open to learning and understanding the game a lot better, and most of the people that watch have that same sort of general curiosity and interest in how the game works. And I've gotten so many resources, like lore resources and all kinds of stat stuff off you guys. So I would love to hear comments on the video, on whether anything makes more sense to you now than it did before, whether I missed something important, or whether what type of any other testing that you'd like to see, or something that you'd like to understand more clearly or see actual examples on screen. Would love to hear comments below. So that's all I have to say for now. Hope you found the video interesting, and I will see you soon.